morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Foss. I'm the Director of Student Support here at SAS, and I'm really glad to have you here today. Today is our meeting where we go through what support services looks like at SAS. You may have a student that's been in our program for a while, and so we'll be giving you some updates on things that we're doing. Or you may be new to SAS and you're learning about what our program is. We do have interpretation available, so if you would like a headset, we have those at the back of the room, which are available for everyone. So in our time together, we're going to be looking at 4 things. We're going to look at tiered supports and basically how we structure our programming. We'll be talking about your child's journey and the people who support your children. We'll talk about partnership and different ways that you could support at home and ways that we're supporting at school. And then we'll close. At the end of the meeting, there will be a PTA parent coffee that will continue here afterwards, and it's a social time for people to get to know each other. So before we get started, I'd like to know who's in the room. And so what I'll do is I'll ask you to stand if this applies to you. So please stand if you have a student in the elementary school. Okay, so about half. Please stand if you have a middle schooler. I see some people doubling up. If you have a student in the high school. Great. Please stand if you're new to SAS. Welcome. If you've been here for 2 to 3 years. If you've been here for 5 or more years. Okay, lots of returners. Please stand if you're new to learning support or your child is new to learning support. Okay, this is a pretty experienced crowd, but we have information if you are new. Please stand if you've met Eddie the Eagle. Oh, just a few of you are lucky enough for that. Please stand if you're going to stay for the PTA session afterwards. Okay, great, yes, everyone's welcome. Stand if you've seen an IESP or an IAP. If you don't know what that is, that's fine, but stand if you've seen one. All right, we're going to show you what those look like today in case you're not sure. And then please stand if you know and love a person who's neurodivergent. Now, neurodivergent might be a term that you're not familiar with. That is anyone whose brain works a little different than what we call normal. All right. We also have some other people in the room that are joining us today from our support services team. And so I'd like to introduce them so you start to get the faces of some of the people that are supporting your children. First, we have Katie Goggins. She is our interventionist in the Early Learning Center, and I see a bunch of people already know her. We have Stephanie Jackson. She has just joined us this year. She is a high school psychologist. Allison Cannon is one of our speech and language pathologists, and Jess Guile is a learning support teacher in the middle school. I think I got everybody. Before we start, we always do look at our community norms when we're thinking about how we work as a community. And the one that I really want to emphasize today is centering the student experience. We really want to keep our children at the center of everything we're doing. And if your child is accessing support services, they may have some needs that are different, and we need to keep that at the center of what we do. But I also think about some of our commitments within support services that go beyond just centering the child. And so these are some ways that we work together. So first, we will always see the whole child. We understand that your children and all of our children are not just their academic profile. They have social emotional needs, they have friends, they have family, and they have really complex lives. And so we want to make sure that we see all the parts of a student when we're looking on how to support them. We also want to focus on possibilities and growth. Sometimes there's a lot of pressure that to make sure our kids are keeping up, or are they meeting the standards? And what we really want to keep in mind is that it's a long learning process, and that everybody learns at different paces and in different ways. It's also important that we work as a team. Our support services providers are here to support and work together with you, because you know your child better than anybody, and we want to make sure that we're getting the information from you so we support your kids well. And then finally, we want to create a safe space built on trust. That means trust with parents, and it means trust with students. And so we want to be partnering with you throughout our work together. All right. So our purpose in support services is to ensure equitable access to learning. We want to remove the barriers. So things like if something takes longer for a student, we want to remove that barrier of time. We want to remove the things that are keeping students from accessing the content like everybody else. We want to make sure all students have access to the same experiences so that they can fully participate, engage, and thrive within our community. And so for our first part, we're going to talk about how that support works. We use a tiered system of support, and at each level, this applies to all the students in our school. We're going to start with Tier 1. Tier 1 is the foundation for all students. And so when we talk about support, this isn't just some students, this is all students in our school get Tier 1 instruction. And so this might look like core instruction in the classroom. It also can look like differentiated instruction in the classroom. That's when teachers may have different groups that are getting slightly different instruction to meet their specific needs. It also includes social emotional learning and building strong relationships with their peers. And so this is for every student in our school. And we find that this core instruction meets the needs of about 80% of kids the first time around, or in the first few times around. But sometimes it doesn't. And so this is when we talk about how do we decide if a student needs more support. And so there are two different ways that we look at identifying if a student needs more help. And the first one is using a universal screener. That's a test that every student takes to help us determine how they are progressing. Some of those include AIMSweb, so our students in the elementary take this test 3 times a year to help us see how they're progressing. And so that if we're seeing that they're not progressing, then we know they might need more help. We also have MAP in the elementary and middle school, and that's a test that's taken once a year, and that also can flag if a student needs extra support. Usually we use the 40th percentile as a starting point. So if a student scores at the 40th percentile or below, it means we want to look a little more deeply and understand what's happening. And so that's when we go to diagnostic assessment. These might be tests that a learning support teacher might give. It could be something or that the classroom teacher can give. And it's to help us understand why a student may be having some challenges. And then after diagnostic assessment, the teacher, that gives us information on how do we want to intervene? What are the supports we want to provide? And so if we find that we think, oh, the student needs some more support, there's a team meeting to determine what that looks like. And this will be communicated with you about what that support looks like, and we'll want your input at that point. The other way that a student might be identified for support is if a teacher or parent has an observation. If you have a concern, you should talk to your child's teacher to share what that is. That's the first point. Then the classroom teacher might provide some intervention, will collect data. They may decide to do a diagnostic assessment, or it might go straight to a meeting to figure out what do those supports look like. The thing that I really want everyone to know is that this is a process that is based on data. We make sure that we're actually looking to see what can the student do and where is the student having difficulties. And it's not just our impressions, that we actually base it on information. And we also want to emphasize this is a team process. This isn't one person saying, oh, your child needs some extra help. It's a group that sits down, and that team can include the classroom teacher, a learning support teacher, speech and language pathologist. It might include a psychologist. It will include a lot of different people providing input so that we're making a very deliberate and careful decision on the supports that are needed. So once we determine that a student needs extra support, that would be Tier 2. And Tier 2 is really focused on targeted skill building. This is when we see a student may just need support with a few things to help them be able to return to the regular instruction. Or they never leave the regular instruction. It just means that we'll reduce this extra support. And so a lot of times, Tier 2 is referred to as core and more. So they're still getting that Tier 1 instruction, and they're just getting a little more to help them close any gaps in their skills. It's focused intervention. And so these are some of the different interventions that our teachers use to support students. For math, our teachers use Bridges, which supplements the IM curriculum. For reading, in literacy, we're using Wilson Reading Systems and the Wilson suite of tools, including Foundations and Just Words. And then for writing, we're using a tool called Step Up to Writing. And so these are very specific tools that are based on research. It's shown that these are ways that we can support students to improve their skills. This is done in small groups. And it's usually short term. It's meant to last anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks. At SAS, we're aligning this to our quarters so that you know that at the end of the quarter, that will be the intervention period. And so this might look like in elementary. It might be a small group in the classroom. It might be a group in the learning community. And if you ever had a chance to visit the learning communities while they're in action, you'll see that there are teachers pulling groups of students for all different reasons. It might be the learning support teacher, it might be the classroom teacher, an English as an additional language teacher, an IA, and so there's always different groups of students that are running at any point in the day. I was just recently visiting a classroom, and I was just really just impressed that there were 4 different adults in the room and grouping up with kids in different ways, and I saw them switch groups, based on what the students need. So it's very common for students to get this type of support, and all students are getting this small group support in elementary. In middle school, this might look like a small group in the classroom, or it might be part of the learning support elective, where the students have that as one of their choice classes, and they get more focused intervention there. In high school, it might be targeted reading support. It might be a lab class or a learning support class. So there's lots of ways that this Tier 2 intervention will look. And so we find with all this type of support, this is needed by about 15 to 20% of students. And so this is a short-term support, and then once they've achieved those goals, then the support is removed. So next I want to show you, I want to show you how we actually document the work that we're doing. And so if you look on your page, on the back side of one of the papers, there is a sample that I'm going to walk you through so you can understand the different parts. So this intervention plan is to help us track what's happening. We want to have a record so we can see, are the interventions working, or do we need to try something different? And so if you take a look, I've color-coded this so you can see the different parts. This green part is completed at the beginning of the process. So students on an intervention plan started the year with this plan complete, just the green part completed. And so the first part is the dates. This tells us how long it lasts. It's 6 to 8 weeks, and we know this is how long we're going to be working on this particular skill. We align our interventions to quarters to make sure that we're reporting on the information. We have so many students that are receiving these types of intervention plans that we want to make sure we're not missing any kids or that we're starting at all different points in the year. But a student can start a plan at any point. Then the next part is a goal. It's a SMART goal, so that it's a specific goal, it's measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. So if you take a look at the sample that we have there, it's given a list of single-syllable words with R-controlled vowels. Susan will be able to read the word fluently with 93 to 100% accuracy as measured by the Core Phonics Survey. So we want to be really clear about what is being worked on. We're not working on everything. We're not working on reading in general. We're working on a very specific skill. And that goal is based on data. And so the data that is used to make that determination is listed there. There's a lot more data that is used in describing a student's progress, but we're just putting the baseline data that helped us to determine that an intervention was needed. The next part identifies the intervention that is going to be used, so that we're saying this, we're using, in this case, UFly. It tells who's providing the intervention, and it tells when and how often. So this is the plan for what's going to happen. Then after 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, the teacher will report on progress. And so in this case, it says Susan has not, I'm gonna scoot down here. In this next one, it shows that it will identify the progress, the actual data to see if there's been a change, and then finally, there's a recommendation. And so there's 6 different options that could happen. The first one, the goal could be met. And if the goal is met, we would say, okay, we're going to discontinue this intervention. The child no longer needs this support because they've mastered this goal. And so we'll end the intervention. But sometimes a student has met the goal because of the intervention, and a teacher may want to reinforce it and continue that same intervention for the next quarter. And then there's some cases where the student has met the goal and there's the next thing to work on. So there's another goal that should be set. So that's if they meet the goal. The other possibility is that the student doesn't meet the goal within that time period. And so we may decide, let's continue the intervention. 8 weeks wasn't enough, and we need a little more time to keep building on that skill. Or we may say, hey, we've tried this for 6 weeks. It's not working. Let's change the intervention and try something different. And then in some cases, the goal is not met, and that's when we decide we need to increase the level of support. So these are the different possibilities. In this particular case on this sample, the goal was not met, and they've decided to continue that same support for the next quarter. So next, we're going to look at what happens when we're increasing this level of support. When we said we've been trying interventions for a long time, or for a quarter, for 2 quarters, and we think the student needs a more intensive level of support. And so this is when we look at Tier 3, and this is really for about 1 to 3% of students. It's really a small number of students, and this is often described as core and more and more. And so it doesn't mean the student just moves into this blue triangle. It means they're getting the Tier 1 support, Tier 2, and Tier 3, so it builds on itself. This is often for students with diagnosed needs. This might be for a student that has been diagnosed with ADHD or an autistic student. It might be a student with a reading disability. And so it's often an identified need that's been identified through academic assessment. This often is for students that have long-term needs or multiple needs, and so the students have more complex needs. And the way that this might look in elementary, this might be world language exemption. And so instead of going to world language, the student may go to their learning support teacher to work on those specific skills. In middle school, it would be the learning support elective. And in high school, it might be a lab class, like a math or an English lab, or a learning support class. Next, I want to show you how we report on this so that we're keeping track of this information about the students. So this is the cover page. This first page is showing general information about, this shows general information, student data, so that we keep track of that. Then the next page is dedicated to background information about the student. And this includes input from the parents, because again, you know your child better than anybody at this school. It will include student input, because we want to make sure we're understanding how they're experiencing their learning and what they understand about their learning. And it would include psychoeducational assessments or other assessments like speech and language or occupational therapy. The next section describes their support plan. And so this tells the type of support they're going to get. It'll tell you the location, whether it's in a class or in a pull-out setting. It will tell how long, and it will also identify who's providing that support. And then the next section is talking about the needs and goals. So I showed you the goals from the intervention plan. That's very short. This one is much more detailed and usually takes, we know that it will take a longer period of time for the student to reach this goal. Usually a full school year is what we're planning for. Within there are short-term objectives, so we're looking at that over a quarter or a shorter period of time. So it breaks that big goal down into little steps. And then the last part is at the end of each quarter, there's a progress update. And so you'll receive this progress update telling how the child is progressing, if they're meeting the goals, or if they're not meeting the goals, because that's when we want to make adjustments. And then the final part of an IESP is the accommodations. These are strategies and tools that can help a student access the content and curriculum. The first step is to identify the barriers of access. So when teachers are writing these plans, we want them to get really clear on what is it that's preventing the student from accessing this content. It might be something like, it might be attention that's making it harder for the student. It might be working memory, but very specific things. So when we write the accommodations, they're really linked to that barrier. And then there's two types of accommodations. There's the classroom accommodations that help the student access the program during the day. And then there are testing accommodations. These are for formal testing. In elementary, we don't have as many testing accommodations because they are not taking as many tests. But by high school, there are many tests that students are taking, including standardized tests for like the SAT, the PSAT, and other things for college admissions. Based on that, for our high school students, we can, the students may apply for College Board, and what it will do is it allows those accommodations during testing. And so to tell you a little more about accommodations, they're tools that give students fair access to the same learning as their classmates. So we're not giving them something extra, we're just changing the method, not the material. So they're still working towards the same standards, we just may make some adjustments. An example might be a student getting extra time on a test. So here's some more examples. It might be getting samples of the work, it might be verbal reminders, written notes, extended time, or a separate testing location. And these accommodations take place in the classroom every day. I often go on walks with our principals to observe how are the accommodations being used in the class, because each teacher is responsible for implementing those accommodations. And so we do checks to see, is that really happening for our students? And then the other place that accommodations will take place is in the high school testing center. There's a special place where students can go when they need a small group or quiet setting. We also document this through an accommodation plan. Some students don't need an IESP or specific intervention, but they do need accommodations in order to access the content. And so we document this in a plan that's very similar to the IESP. It has all the parts except the goal. And so it will just focus on what are the accommodations needed in class. Okay. I want to share some information about the timeline on which we communicate, because we want you to know what you can expect. This varies by each division, but this is the general outline of what you can expect. In August, that's when the students come back, you meet their teacher, and your child's case manager will reach out to you. In September, we have our coffee. In October, in just about a month, you'll be getting a Q1 progress update, and I'm going to show you where you'll find that. In November, we're having a parent workshop on executive function. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. In December, then you get the next progress report. We have a parent coffee in February. Usually that coffee is on transitions, so as we're starting to think about your child moving from one grade level to the next. In March, you get the Q3 progress report, right around the time of parent conferences. Again, that varies by division. Middle school has their conferences in April, so it's within that time frame. And then in April and May, your child's case manager will reach out to you so that you can all contribute to developing the plan for the next year. As I said before, we really want to make sure that we end the school year with a plan that's written by the teacher that knows your child the best. They've spent a full year with them, and they're basing it on everything they've learned about your child. And then that plan is ready to go the first day of school in the new school year. And so that will be shared with you at the beginning of June. Now, all of that takes a lot of people to put this all together. And so we actually have a very large support team. We have SELIAs in the elementary that are assigned to work with specific students. Our high school learning support team, our middle school, they're very fun people. If you can, I don't know how clear you can see. We have IAs in the elementary school, our speech and language team, as well as an occupational therapist, and our elementary team. So there's like about 50 plus people that work in the support services team to provide support for all students. And so this is just a breakdown of our team. We have 29 learning support teachers, Katie, who you met earlier, our ELC interventionist, and we also have learning support in Chinese immersion for Chinese language support. We have 6 speech and language pathologists across all parts of the school, 5 psychologists, and we have an occupational therapist, and we are very close to being able to start in-school support in the elementary, and we'll have more information coming on that shortly. Now, one of the roles that these different people have is case manager. The case manager is your main point of contact. So case manager is the person who really coordinates the plan. They may write it, they may facilitate a meeting to bring all people together. They will monitor your child's progress. They update the reports, and really it's all about collaboration. And so just in brief, they're the point person, they're the plan developer, and they are the progress monitor. At the beginning of the year, learning support teachers and actually all support services teams reached out to families. They may not have identified themselves as the case manager. Some people did and some people didn't. But that is your main point of contact. They're the person that if there's going to be a meeting, they'll call everybody together. And we do that because there's often more than one person supporting your child. Now, we talked about the support services people that are supporting your child, but this also needs to take place in the classroom. And so we share the plans and information with all teachers. And so all teachers have access to the documents for the students they teach. And then the case managers are available to provide extra guidance. I just want to show you what this looks like. This would be a roster that a teacher would see on their computer. This is in Veracross. This is where they take attendance. And you'll see next to it, there's a green book. That green book means that the student has accommodations. And so the teacher can hover over it and see what those accommodations are for every student that has one in their class. This is really helpful because our specialist teachers can also see the green books. Our classroom teachers can see it. Anyone that works with the student can actually see what the accommodations are, because as a school, we're all responsible for making sure that we're we're providing access to students, and many students need these supports to do that. Okay. We do want to make sure we're sharing the information with the right people. So people can't see every student's green book or every student's document, but we want the teachers that do work with them to have access. And then also really protecting student information. And so now I'm going to show you where you're going to get these documents. At the end of each quarter, we take the document and we provide the report, and then it's uploaded into the parent portal on Veracross. And so you will get an email. It will come from me. It will show you the link to click on, and then you're going into your child's report, and you'll see the latest update of that document. And we're always looking to improve, and so we're really in the process right now of looking for an online system that will make this more efficient and easier to communicate. And so we plan within the next year to have something that will look a little different. Okay. And then finally, I want to just talk about some strategies that might be helpful for you as you're thinking on how to support your child. And so one of the areas that we're looking at as a team is executive functioning. Executive functioning is our strategies that help us to plan and organize and think ahead on how we function. This is something that all of us have and they're tools that make our lives much easier. And so I'm just going to share 3 with you now, but we are also having Peg Dawson, who is one of the leading experts on executive function, come in to work with our teachers and our educators in November, and we'll also be having a session for parents at that time. And so 3 quick strategies that are often very helpful for our students, and probably for all of us too, are creating a predictable launch pad, making plans visible, and focusing on the process, not just the product. And so the launch pad idea is really having a spot where you keep things organized. It might be the spot near the door. You probably might have some of these things because you've developed your executive function skills, but our students are still learning them, and so they need us to provide that support. And so it's getting things ready the night before and making sure everything can be found in one place. Because for students that may have ADHD or other things that are distracting them, it really helps to build that routine. Another one is making plans visible. One of the things that we are seeing is with the use of technology, it's really hard to tell what people are doing on their computer or their phones. It's not visible to us anymore. We were at a workshop last year where they were showing a video of a classroom in the past, and what would happen is everybody would go to turn in their paper, and so the kid that didn't know would start to see, everybody's turning in their paper. I should probably turn in my paper. But now, as we've moved to technology, we don't know what the kid next to you is doing. They might be submitting their work. They might be on YouTube. They might be chatting with a friend. And so it's really hard to learn from these cues. So what we can do as adults and parents is to make things more visible to them. And so this one would include, you could have a whiteboard or a family calendar, but something where you can help your child to track the events that are coming up. And then finally, focusing on the process, not just the product. And so this is shifting away from the outcome, like what grade did you get? It's really helping to think about, how did you tackle the problem? What were the strategies that you used? This strategy helps students to build metacognition, and so really to understand what are they doing that's helping them to be successful. And so before we close, we've got a good amount of time. Are there any questions? I'll take questions at this time. Yes.
Yeah.
Could you just start the first part? If your child has,
Psychological education report, and that needs to be in on admissions. Do we approach the learning support staff to kickstart accommodations usage and that discussion? Do we get approached for that?
so through our admissions process, we do review all of the documents, and in that process, the team determines what is going to be needed for support. The team, upon reviewing that, in some cases, we look and say, yes, we need to write an accommodation plan right away. Sometimes the reports don't, we determine that there isn't something that's needed at that time. And so if they didn't reach out to you, it might be that the team determined that, but that doesn't mean that you can't continue that conversation. And so the first place that I would go is talk to your child's teacher and mention that you have this report, but the reports do get shared with our psychologists. We share the report, we don't share the reports directly with teachers because there's a lot of personal information that not everybody needs. But there is very important information that teachers do need, and our psychologists interpret that and give them the information. So you should definitely, if anytime you have a question or a thought, you should reach out to your child's teacher as the first step, and then they'll be able to help direct you. And then sometimes we do see lots of psychological reports where they'll list a lot of different things. What we really want to do is see what does the child actually need to access the what's happening in the classroom and in the whole school. And so we want to work with students to be really deliberate about what are the tools they're using. As I said before, sometimes there can be a really long list, and when there are lots of things, it becomes very hard to implement, but when we pick key strategies, that will really help. So reach out to the teacher first. Okay. Yes?
Reach out the teacher. For middle school, it should be the advisory or the
You should start with advisory, but Jess, can you verify that? If in middle school, who should the parent reach out to? Is it the advisor? Advisor. Yeah, because they'll be the first point, and then they'll be able to pass it on to the right people.
You mentioned an executive functioning talk.
Yes. It's going to be in November. I'll show that in a minute. November 14th. Okay. Any other questions? I will be here afterwards too, and you can approach me if you have any personal or individual questions you want to ask. All right. So here are the upcoming events. Next week on October 2nd, there is a PTA parent coffee on mental health. Conferences are coming up in October. It varies by division. Those are primarily a chance to meet with your child's classroom teacher, but at each division, there's a different plan for you to be able to meet with support services educators. On Friday, October 19th, is when the Q1 updates will be sent out. And that's usually about 3:30, but you'll receive that by the end of the day. On Monday, October 27th, we have a DEI community meeting. We want to make sure that when we talk about diversity, we're also thinking about neurodivergence and different ways that brains work among lots of different types of identities. Friday, November 14th, is the executive function workshop. And then in February, we'll have our last coffee of the year. So this is the information about the mental health workshop that's happening next week. That will be in the West Theater. I'll leave that up for a second if you want to sign up. The other workshop coming up, this is with Peg Dawson. She's the author of Smart But Scattered. This sign up has already gone out if you signed up for this, there was also a button you could press for this workshop on November 14th, and we'll be sending out more information again to everyone. And that brings us to the end. So I always love to get your feedback. I want to know if this was the right information for you, if it was the right level of information. Always love to get your feedback. And also, what topics would you like to hear about in the future? So if you have a moment to do that, it's much appreciated. Otherwise, it'll be time to head into the PTA social in just a couple minutes, and I'll be here to answer any questions that anyone has. So thank you so much for coming today, and look forward to getting to know all of you. I'm going to hand it over to Jessica, who's part of the PTA team.
Yes, thank you, Jen. Hi, everyone. This is Jessica here, from part of the PTA team. Right now is really time for us to connect. Feel free to grab a bite or grab a drink, and really, ask any questions that you guys were wondering. To get wanting to get parent experiences. We are here to support, really, to share experience about learning support or getting help, etc. Just feel free to hang out and connect and enjoy the food sponsored by PTA. Thank you.